All questions. Questions orales. L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Etchemins, Lévis. 24 Liberal MPs are asking the Prime Minister to step aside for the same reason, by the way, that Canadians are calling for elections. Cost of living is up, there are long wait lines at food banks, housing is unaffordable, the debt has doubled. But there's something that I don't understand. The people who should be supporting the Prime Minister are dropping him, but the Bloc Québécois persists in maintaining him in power. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has failed. He has failed when it comes to immigration in particular. Will he call elections now?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One thing is clear. Yes, the Conservative Party has talked a lot about the problems that we're facing in the country right now. The member spoke about the challenges that people are facing. And she speaks about them every day, but where's the plan? They're clear on the first step, but they don't have a plan after that, Mr. Speaker. This is an example of how the Conservative Party is a populist party, a right-wing party. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Etchemins, Lévis. After 9 years of this Liberal government, the country is in chaos. 2 million Canadians are relying on food banks for food, and everyone is affected by homelessness. And 24 Liberal MPs want the Prime Minister to go. Parliament is paralysed right now because the government refuses to be transparent in another scandal. The Bloc has supported the government 200 times. They need to explain themselves to Quebecers. Is the Prime Minister ready to do the honourable thing and call elections? That's the plan, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I have a lot of respect for my honourable colleague, and she's right that Canadians are going through a difficult time. But, Mr. Speaker, where was she? Where was she when we voted to support seniors? Where was she and her caucus when we lowered taxes for Canadians? Where was she when we put in place a dental care program for Canadians? Mr. Speaker, I know what that member and all Conservatives did. They voted against. They voted against Canadians. We are there for all Canadians and all Quebecers. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Etchemins, Lévis. Where were those 24 MPs, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the rise in the cost of housing, the use of food banks, and, the housing encampments that we're seeing? All of this is the disastrous record of the Liberals supported by the Bloc Québécois. And now the immigration system once again is failing because of Liberal improvisation on that file. This Prime Minister needs to call elections. When is he going to do it? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, what I'm concerned about is the growing caucus against abortion in the Conservative Party. We've heard from Conservatives who are still in caucus, and we've heard from previous caucus members that it's because of their values. Well, on this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we will always fight for women's rights like for abortion.
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Falcon Islands and Rideau Lakes.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, the cost of housing has doubled, our national debt has doubled, and Canadians can't afford to feed themselves or their families. Now we've learned that there are 24 Liberal MPs who are looking for the Prime Minister to resign. After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up for this Prime Minister who can't fix what he's broken in this country while he's dealing with his revolting caucus. So will he stand up today and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And for years we've been hearing rumours about the Conservative Party of Canada's leader, and now it's out in the open. His party is full of people fighting to restrict the freedom of women. The MP for Richmond-Athabasca, former member, acted with his conscience to stand up for women. But why won't the other members of his caucus do the same? In fact, what they're doing, Mr. Speaker, is fraternizing with the lobbyists that want to attack the rights of women across this country.
The honourable member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, did you hear that? It's the sound of desperation from a government that's broken absolutely everything in this country. They broke housing, they broke immigration. Canadians can't afford to eat, heat, or house themselves after 9 years of these failed NDP Liberals. And all Canadians want is to be able to afford a home, to be able to have a home in a good, safe neighborhood where they can retire comfortably. And all they're asking to do is to be able to work hard in exchange for that privilege. It was a promise we made to Canadians, and they broke it. So instead of fighting with his 24 members who want him to resign, why won't he stand up and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I can assure my honourable colleague that we understand the challenges that families are experiencing in our communities, but those families are right to ask who is actually fighting for them. The seniors who have earned their pensions, not just with their premiums, but with decades of hard work, bad backs, busted joints, are facing an opposition leader who has a history of gutting their pensions. The Conservative Party has members who voted against removing the interest on student loans. And families, if you receive the Canada Child Benefit, know that there is not one Conservative member of Parliament who voted to support you with thousands of dollars every year. Mr. Speaker, there are two choices: a Liberal government who will stand up for families, a Conservative leader who will stand up for himself.
The honourable member for Saint-Jean. The federal minister is lowering immigration targets finally, but the new thresholds don't reflect the capacity for welcome in Quebec. After 300, Quebec is going to have to receive over 80,000 new immigrants a year under the new plan. Mr. Speaker, those who know the situation best in Quebec are the political parties in the National Assembly in Quebec, and there's no party that is suggesting more than 80,000 a year. Will the Liberals finally consult the provinces and adjust their immigration thresholds? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Quebec has more power over its immigration system than any other province or territory in the country because it controls over 50% of immigration for temporary residents. The Liberals have put in place a plan for immigration, and we will move forward.
Excuse me.
The honourable member for Saint-Jean. The new targets don't fix the main issue in Quebec, which is asylum seekers. There are 160,000 just in Quebec, and we continue to welcome more than our fair share. Quebecers can't continue to house, give care to, educate, and teach French to so many new people a year just because the other provinces refuse their fair share. This government has to create the conditions so that every province does their part, but we've seen no progress since the summer. There's no negotiations underway. When will the Liberals finally get to work? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, I work with Quebec all the time. Immigration is necessary to the growth of our economy and to strengthening our communities. Canadians want a solid and durable immigration system that will allow Canada and everyone who lives in Canada to succeed. That's exactly what we've done with our announcement yesterday. We are reducing the number of temporary and permanent residents over the short term to relieve pressure on housing and infrastructure. The Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby.
5 million Canadians are left stranded without the health care they need. This is bringing more people into our already overcrowded hospitals for issues that could have been caught earlier and treated earlier. Our health care continues to be in crisis under the Liberals. And the Conservatives want Canadians to pay to get the care they need so that CEOs can increase their profits. People deserve quality health care without having to pull out their credit cards. Why are the Liberals failing to fix our health care system and forcing people to scramble for the health care they need?
That's right.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Speaker. On this side of the House, we will always stand for a publicly funded healthcare system. And that's why we're making unprecedented investment in our system, working with our provinces and territories. Over $200 billion over 10 years. We've never seen that kind of investment. Not to mention investments in dental care, investment in farmer care. These are the kind of things that we're doing, building a healthcare system post-pandemic so that no Canadian is left behind and they have access to good publicly funded healthcare system.
The honourable member from Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, while the Liberals talk about abortion as a right but deny access to that right, Conservatives are actively voting for legislation to end safe, trauma-informed abortion care. You can just ask their former caucus members who says anti-choice MPs are calling the shots. Whether you need heart surgery, a knee surgery, or an abortion, people have a right to access public health care. Will the federal government protect access to abortion care by enforcing the Canada Health Act and save our public health care system?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I woke up and I read the most disturbing article. It was an interview, actually, with the former Member of Parliament with the Conservatives, now Member of Parliament for Richmond Athabasca, and he said that he left the party in part because his conscience couldn't stand for the attack on women's rights and freedoms, the inroads that anti-abortionists have made with the Conservative Party. And you know what was so upsetting, Mr. Speaker? Not that he talked about that, but that he also alleged the way that they're trying to hide their real selves. Mr. Speaker, will that leader stand up and stand firmly with the rights of women in this country?
The honourable member from Stormont, South Glengarry.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, time is up for the Prime Minister's endless chaos and failures. And let's use his own words on immigration just from last year to prove it. Quote, as our government is raising immigration levels to the highest levels that have ever been, people are like, we're already facing challenges in housing. Where are we going to house these 500,000 people per year? And now, a year too late, the Prime Minister made an announcement that is an admission of a massive failure of his record after 9 years. Will the Prime Minister admit that his flip-flop has caused lasting damage to Canada's housing market, healthcare, and jobs?
The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
Mr. Speaker, we've answered that question already this week. My question, and a question that Canadians from the queer community want to know, is where was that member, who is a member of the queer community, when it came to 50% of kids living in the street who are LGBT because their straight parents kicked them out? Where's that member when Blaine Higgs went after trans kids in New Brunswick? Where's that member when Danielle Smith is saying she's going to take the rights of trans kids away? Where's that member when Scott Moe is focusing on bathrooms in a Saskatchewan election? He will not show up at Canadian Pride events when we talk about trans issues. He should be ashamed. He is not defending the queer community of Canada.
The honourable member from Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
I'm proud of who I am and proud of my integrity when that minister can't even name the other Randy. So I'm not going to take any lectures from that guy, Mr. Speaker. But here's what the Prime Minister said just last year about the immigration system. Quote, there are a lot of pressures on our system, increasing the immigration levels. Interestingly, though, it'll take some pressure off the system. They have absolutely failed, and they broke our immigration system. They've doubled housing costs, and they did a massive flip-flop yesterday that they're embarrassed to even talk about. After 9 years, why can't we just have a carbon tax election to boot that member in this government out of here?
The honourable minister for the honourable member for Employment and Workforce Development.
Where's that member's voice and the members of the Conservatives when queer refugees are struggling to come to the country? I'll tell you, they are nowhere to be found. Where is that member sticking up for trans kids when we have Canadian Pride caucus meetings? Not to be found. Neither is the MP for Thornhill. Mr. Speaker, they try to wrap themselves in the rainbow flag when it's convenient to get Conservative votes. They are simply not truthful with Canadians. They are not truthful with the queer community. Do you hear the heckling, Mr. Speaker? They can't handle it when we punch. They can't handle it when we stick up for the queer community. They do not stick up for the 2S LGBT community. We do. We're Liberals. We're the government. We've got kids' backs.
Colleagues. Thank you. Thank you. The honourable member. The honourable. Colleagues. The honourable member from Calgary, Nose Hill.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the reality is that it was this government who fought tooth and nail for an extension of the Rainbow Railroad refugee program that was started under the former Harper Conservative government, and all the while they allowed countless people who are in upstate New York to illegally cross the border. That is the record of this government's broken immigration system. And if he wants to talk about queer youth or any Canadian, the reality is that this government's inflationary crisis is what is putting people out on the streets. They've broken Canada's immigration system. Will they allow for a carbon tax election to allow Conservatives to fix their mess?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Speaker, immigration is key to economic growth of Canada. This country is full of incredible story of immigrants. One speaking right now of a country that has welcomed people from around the world. But the government has always taken a very responsible approach to immigration to make sure that Canada continues to grow. And that's exactly the kind of responsible approach we are demonstrating. The work we did to bring immigrants so that we can keep Canada moving forward during the pandemic, and the work we're doing now so that we can keep up with pace of Canadian population growth, housing we need, and the infrastructure Canadians deserve.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Nose Hill.
Yep. A responsible approach to immigration. The former immigration minister bragged about increasing international student permits from about 400,000 to 500,000, knowing that shady universities were abusing these students and that these students were living under bridges in Toronto. That's the record of this government. This government, their responsible approach the member talks about, they dropped security clearance certificates from their own background checks for temporary residences. There's nothing responsible about this government. Will they allow for a carbon tax election so that Conservatives can fix Canada's broken immigration system?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Well, it's always rich to hear from Conservatives when they talk about fake colleges. I hope the member opposite is calling her Premier Danielle Smith to make sure that those fake colleges are not getting credentials. Or I hope the Ontario members are calling Doug Ford to let them know that they should not be accrediting fake colleges. On this side of the House, Speaker, we will always make sure that we are taking a responsible approach. Immigration is important for Canada. We did so during the pandemic, and moving forward, we're making sure that we make the readjustment necessary so that Canadian population and economy grows at a responsible path.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Mr. Speaker, I have the Prime Minister's immigration plan in front of me, the one he submitted yesterday to the House of Commons. What's inside of it? Nothing. A white page. After 9 years, the Prime Minister hasn't only broken the immigration system, he forgot his plan, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister's regrets are not credible, no more than his improvised, photocopied, back-of-a-napkin plan. Will the Prime Minister admit that he's pushed the immigration system to a breaking point, causing long-term damage to the housing market, to health care, and to jobs in Canada? Before I ask the Parliamentary Secretary to answer, I would just like to give a warning to all members to please avoid using props and papers that fall out of books. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, the new plan is a transition plan that directly meets the changing needs of our country. That's what Canadians want, and that's what they've asked us to do. These actions are necessary to increase our prosperity and support new arrivals and make sure that they can succeed as well. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Mr. Speaker, what do you call somebody who sets a house on fire, who watches it burn, and then when there's nothing left but the ashes, then calls the firefighters? Is that a hero or a pyromaniac? Well, Mr. Speaker, this is exactly what the Prime Minister's done with the support of the Bloc Québécois in immigration. He invited the world to come to Canada. He saw the cost of housing double. The cost of food is up, and when he saw the damage he caused, he said that he regrets it. Too little, too late, not credible. When will he call elections so that we can fix everything that he's broken? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, after the pandemic, we increased immigration levels to allow our economy and our businesses to succeed. our post-pandemic measures reflected what Canada needed at the time. The new plan reflects what Canada needs today by recognizing demographic changes, and we will continue to support economic growth over the long term. The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Labelle. Quebecers are very worried by the poor conditions and the poor education at Bedford School in Montreal. We know we need to do more to promote secularism in our schools, but when we want to do more, the federal government wants to do less. We've seen that Bill 21 isn't enough, but Ottawa wants to fight it. Bill 21 protects the right of children to have public secular education. After the Bedford School case, does the federal government finally understand that attacking Bill 21 means attacking the rights of children? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The first thing that we need to remind those listening to us today of is that respecting the dignity and the safety of children is the responsibility of all and our first priority. It's the government of Quebec that is responsible for education in Quebec. The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Labelle. What we saw at the Bedford School is adults who were going against secularism in our schools by giving priority to their own values to the detriment of schools. The priority in schools, it's not adults, it's kids. And attacking Bill 21 is doing the opposite of that. Bill 21 in Clause 4 protects the right of everyone to receive secular public services. Bill 21 protects the right of children to get secular public education. And that is what the Liberals are attacking. Do they not realize what they're doing? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister responsible for Families and Children. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I agree with my colleague across the way that school is a place where children must be able to learn and grow and stimulate their critical thinking skills. And what's unacceptable is that there are children in Quebec who have been treated in the way that things seem to have happened at Bedford School. We've also noted that it's the responsibility and the jurisdiction of the government of Quebec to deal with this problem. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. This Prime Minister has destroyed our immigration system through his and his ministers' incompetence. He can't fix what he broke on immigration, housing, or anything else because he's busy fighting his own caucus. Now, the Prime Minister is admitting his policies have been totally incompetent, stating immigration has, quote, grown at a rate far beyond what Canada has been able to absorb, unquote. Will the Prime Minister admit he is destroying Canada's immigration system and accept his own personal failure?
He broke Canada. The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, we've answered that question already in this House several times, but the real question for me today is how does that member feel about the anti-abortionist that she sits with every single day in her caucus, with a leader that won't march in pride with the LGBTQ community, with a leader who won't stand up for the rights of the most vulnerable in this community, with a leader that attacks the most vulnerable people in this community on a daily basis? How does that member sleep at night?
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Canada had one of the most well-respected and functioning immigration systems in the world before this Liberal government. And the current immigration minister even stated the growing population impacting housing is, quote, where we have a serious issue we need to address, unquote. The former immigration minister, now housing minister, stated the immigration system is, quote, really disconcerting. It's really a system that has gotten out of control, unquote. This is an admission of his own incompetence. Will the Prime Minister fire the former immigration minister, now housing minister, or if not, will the housing minister resign in disgrace?
Good question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Leader of the Government to the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, I think the members opposite need to get a reality check. When the leader of the Conservative Party was a part of a Conservative government, you know what they did in immigration? I was the critic when they actually froze the parents and grandparents, and then when that didn't resolve the problem, what did they do? They actually canceled the program, saying you can't sponsor mom and dad to come here. When it came to overseas immigrants coming to Canada, they actually hit the delete button, deleting hundreds of thousands of potential people being able to come to Canada because they couldn't deal with processing times. Don't lecture us on broken immigration.
The honourable member from Kenora.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. The Prime Minister has destroyed our immigration system through his incompetence, and he is too busy fighting his own caucus and clinging to power to be able to fix what he has broken. He has now admitted that his policies have failed, but he also took his former immigration minister and put him in charge of the housing crisis, Mr. Speaker. Instead, why doesn't the Prime Minister simply fire that minister for his incompetence?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, what's shining through right now in this debate on immigration is the far-right Canadian Alliance Reform Party roots of the Conservative Party of Canada. You know, our government is proud of the fact that we've provided over 54,000 Afghan refugees with safe refuge here in Canada, and over 300,000 Ukrainians have come here following Putin's illegal war in Ukraine. And when my family fled Soviet Hungary in the 1950s, Canada had their doors open to people who were arriving here to flee from violence and persecution. And I really fear that under a Conservative government with this far-right xenophobic immigration concept, families like my mom's would be sent away.
The honourable member from Kenora.
Mr. Speaker, the member speaks of some of our history, and it's true that Canada had a 150-year consensus on immigration, but they have destroyed that. That's right. And if this government and if that Prime Minister was so sure of himself, they would not have admitted they have failed. But again, the same minister that was responsible for that has now been put in charge of housing, and that really hasn't gone much better, Mr. Speaker. Housing costs have doubled, and young Canadians have given up completely on their dream of home ownership. Everywhere that minister goes, incompetence follows. When will the Prime Minister just fire him?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Speaker, we will always defend immigration and make sure that immigration remains an integral part of Canadian success story. But Speaker, you know what else we will always defend is a woman's freedom. Women's freedom, the right to choose. And what I have not heard from any of those members from across from the Conservative benches is an affirmation that they will also defend women's right to choose, because now we know, hearing from one of their former members, that they have been plotting behind. They're trying to hide the fact that they want to take away women's right to choose. That is unacceptable, and we will fight it every single day for all Canadians.
Oh. The honourable member from Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, women and gender-diverse individuals are fearful of a growing anti-choice movement emboldened by Conservative MPs. While the Liberals allow access to abortion to be chipped away at, the Conservative leader voted 5 times against legislation that would, that would take away the right to choose. Access to abortion is access to health care. Right. So will the Liberals enforce the Canada Health Act to ensure everyone has access to full, safe, trauma-informed abortion care?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, I absolutely agree. Abortion is health care, and we should have equal access across this country. What concerns me is the growing anti-abortion caucus on the Conservative side. We've heard evidence of this. Their power on the Conservative leader is growing. We heard it from the member from Peace River Westlock. We heard it from the former Conservative from Richmond, Athabasca. He was in a recent documentary. He said, "I left the Conservative Party for reasons of values and convictions," because there was an increase in the number of pro-life MPs inside the Conservative caucus.
The honourable member from Port Moody, Coquitlam.
The government needs to enforce the Canada Health Act on abortion, Mr. Speaker. Canada's most vulnerable seniors are seeing hundreds of dollars less every year because the Liberals created yet another GIS clawback. With grocery bills and rent soaring, every single dollar matters, especially for seniors. Clearly, the Liberals are taking their lead from the Conservatives, who cut pensions and increased retirement age. Seniors deserve respect and dignity, but with Liberals and Conservatives, it's lose or lose. That's when will the Liberals end their cruel and callous clawbacks?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, the fact is we have been there for seniors from the get-go. The first thing that we did was reverse the Conservatives' increase in the retirement age from 65 to 67. We brought it back to 65. We enhanced the GIS, taking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of seniors out of poverty. We have enhanced the CPP while the Conservative leader questions its greatness. So you know what? We're always going to be there for seniors from now on and into the future.
The honourable member from Kingston and the Islands.
Mr. Speaker, the RCMP report linking the Indian government to serious criminal activity in Canada, such as extortion, interference in the democratic process, spying, arson, and homicides, poses a real threat to our country. National security experts also say that one key action political party leaders can take is to simply obtain their security clearance. Yet the leader of the opposition refuses to do that. Could the government explain why the leader of the opposition should join all other party leaders and get his security clearance?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Speaker, the involvement of the Indian government agents in targeting Canadians, particularly Sikh communities, is a grave violation of Canadian sovereignty. Foreign interference costs lives, and Canadians expect party leaders to be informed and seek the truth on matters as important as their safety and national security. Yet, Mr. Speaker, it is shameful, absolutely shameful, that the Conservative Party leader is the only party leader in this House refusing to get his security clearance, closing his eyes to foreign interference breaches within his own party. Mr. Speaker, what is he hiding? Who is he trying to protect? Why does he put his own political interests above the safety of Canadians? Why?
The honourable member from Calgary Centre.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Crime is up in Toronto with shootings up 45% and gun-related homicides up 62% since last year. While the Prime Minister celebrates on social media, police associations are condemning his failed handgun policy. The Toronto Police Association states criminals did not get your message. Will the Prime Minister stop working against the police and reverse his failed crime wave policy?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's really concerning that all Canadians should be aware that what Conservatives are proposing in their ways to make our streets safer is to actually put more guns on the street. We have banned handguns and assault weapons that were designed for the battlefield, and Conservatives want to make those guns legal again. Mr. Speaker, we know investments in crime prevention and investments in our border to prevent illegal guns into our country, and to ban handguns is the solution to make our communities safe.
Good job.
I'm going to remind members, please, not to take the floor unless they're recognized by the Speaker. The Speaker is now recognizing the honourable member from Calgary Centre.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. When that member responded on social media to similar claims, the Toronto Police Association said, "We are sharing data about gun violence in Toronto. These facts represent the work of our members and the lives of victims. Shame on anyone who suggests otherwise." End quote. After 9 years of violent gun crime has doubled in Canada. In Calgary, it's quadrupled. That is the Liberal record. Will the Prime Minister end his self-congratulatory rhetoric and start listening to the police to stop this deadly crime wave?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, while Conservatives like quotes, let me quote their record on the issue. When Conservatives were in power, they cut $143 million out of CBSA. That was 1,100 CBSA employees. And what did the former president of the public safety workers say at the time? He said, quote, "More weapons, illegal drugs, child pornography will pass through our borders, not to mention terrorists and sexual predators and hardened criminals," end quote. That's the Conservative record.
The honourable member from Sturgeon River Parkland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think what that member just illustrated is what has happened under 9 years of this NDP Liberal government. Taxes are up, costs are up, violent crime continues to go up. The Liberals' gun ban does nothing to stop violent crime on our streets. In fact, violent gun crime is up 116% across Canada since this Liberal government took power. The Vancouver Police Association agrees. They stated, stopping legal sales will not stop criminals from getting guns illegally. They're only restricting law-abiding citizens while doing little to actually address crime and violence. When will these Liberals finally listen to police, stop attacking law-abiding gun owners, and go after the violent criminals instead?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I spent 39 years of my life fighting gun violence in the City of Toronto. And one of the things I learned is that cops count. But today, Mr. Speaker, there are 700 fewer police officers in Toronto than when I was the chief. And those are the same police officers that fought guns and gangs. They gave evidence at bail hearings and they kept neighborhoods safe. But just like Stephen Harper, who cut 1,000 RCMP jobs, successive Conservative mayors and premiers have frozen police budgets and frozen police hiring. And this is the cost, the price that we all pay for reckless Conservative cuts. And Mr. Speaker, if the Conservatives are looking for causation of the increase in violence, look in the mirror.
The honourable member from Sturgeon River Parkland.
Well, Mr. Speaker, under this Liberal government and under that Liberal minister, RCMP recruitment is at all-time lows. They should be the ones looking in the mirror. The Liberals' record on violent crime and car theft is abysmal. The Insurance Bureau of Canada published a report showing that car theft claims are up 138% since this Liberal government took power. Whenever the Liberals get up and brag about their action on car theft, people don't know whether to laugh or to cry. They're admitting that they failed terribly, but now they're bragging that they're failing just a little less spectacularly than they were before. When will these Liberals finally get serious, stop targeting law-abiding Canadians, and get serious about violent crime instead?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, once again, we see Conservative hypocrisy. They think the way to keep our streets safe is by putting more guns in the hands of criminals. They think reducing workers at the CBSA to inspect illegal imports of guns is going to keep communities safe. Conservatives are all about cuts, including cuts to police forces, cuts to inspections at our border, and they want to ensure that handguns are legal again. Mr. Speaker, we know and Canadians know that keeping our communities safe is by banning illegal handguns.
The Honourable Member for Joliette. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Health is once again threatening end-of-life care for Quebecers. It is stated that Quebec should wait before moving forward with advance requests for medical assistance in dying. And the Minister is even threatening to challenge Quebec's decision and says that he will clarify his intentions very soon. But Quebec's answer is clear. We will be moving forward to protect people who are ill. Quebecers who are suffering from illnesses like Alzheimer's. They have waited long enough. Will the federal government get out of the way? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Medical assistance in dying is a complex and deeply personal question, especially when it comes to advance requests. Potential slippage in eligibility to MAID is a matter of great importance, and we need to consult with medical professionals and other stakeholders throughout the country to consider the matter of advance requests. The Honourable Member for Joliette. Well, that's all very well, but listen, Quebec will be moving forward with advance requests for MAID as of October 30th in 5 days. So the federal government should be supporting Quebec in delivering appropriate healthcare instead of making threats. And it can help by amending the criminal code to help doctors feel safe, because today in La Presse, doctors have been stating that they are still concerned about their legal protections, even though Quebec has given a clear directive to the justice system to not bring charges. Will the federal government help doctors by amending the criminal code? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, given the complexity I spoke of, we will take the necessary amount of time to look into the details of what the government of Quebec has announced. We remain determined to cooperate closely with Quebec and with all of the provinces and territories in order to carefully assess next steps.
The Honourable Member from Barrie, Springwater, Oro-Medonte.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Police across Canada are slamming the Prime Minister and his self-congratulatory social media campaign touting a failed handgun policy that has stopped violent gun crime. The Toronto Police Association had to fact-check the Prime Minister and remind him that 85% of guns seized by their members can be sourced to the United States. After 9 years, violent gun crime is up over 100%. Will the Prime Minister stop working against the police and reverse his crime wave policies?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Security.
Mr. Speaker, if Conservatives are so concerned about illegal guns entering the country through our borders, then precisely why did they cut 1,100 jobs of CBSA, over $100 million of that budget? Let me also quote what the former president of the Public Safety Workers Union had to say. He said, what the government made us to believe here is that the budget cuts are not going to have an impact on direct service provided to our community is wrong. He also said that this threatens Canada's public safety and national security. Why should we trust a record like that?
The Honourable Member from Barrie Springwater or Medante.
Mr. Speaker, just this week, the Toronto Police Association specifically pointed out the member opposite for her misinformation. Hopefully this misinformation today gets pointed out again. Police associations in Toronto, York, Vancouver and Surrey have all spoken out against this Prime Minister's failed handgun policy that has done nothing to stop violent crime. When will this Prime Minister listen to police, stop going after law-abiding citizens and go after the gangsters and gun smugglers who are terrorizing our streets?
The Honourable Minister for National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, we promised Canadians that we would strengthen gun control. The Conservatives have promised the gun lobby that they'll weaken it. Mr. Speaker, if you want to reduce gun crime in this country, you've got to make it harder to commit gun crime, and you've got to make it more likely to get caught. You make it harder to commit gun crime by increasing and strengthening gun control in this country, and you make sure that criminals will get caught if you don't cut thousands of police officer positions from our cities and from our provinces right across this country. We've seen the price that Canadians have paid for Conservative cuts to essential services that we all rely on. And Mr. Speaker, when they want to know what's really happening, the union should know you've cut their membership.
The Honourable Member from Kootenay, Columbia.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years with this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. Police departments are slamming the Liberal NDP gun policies. Toronto police report shootings are up 45% and gun-related homicides 62% compared to the same time last year. Mr. Speaker, 85% of guns seized by the police are sourced in the United States. After 9 years, violent gun crime is up over 100%. Will the Prime Minister stop working against the police and reverse his crime wave policies?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And what Conservatives won't tell you is that under Conservative government, there were cuts to CBSA that allowed more illegal weapons to cross our borders. Conservative provincial governments have cut and slashed police budgets that have had a reduction of police on our streets. While Conservative governments create cuts, we invest in our police services, we invest in our borders, and we get guns out of our streets.
The Honourable Member for Laval-les-Îles. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship presented the 2025-2027 Immigration Levels Plan. This plan will directly respond to the changing needs of our country. We know that immigration can be a powerful tool for the vitality of Francophone communities outside Quebec. Could we get an update, please, from the Parliamentary Secretary on the efforts that our government has made to support immigration outside Quebec? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The vitality of Francophone communities outside Quebec is a priority for our government. In the 2025-2027 plan, the percentage of Francophone permanent residents in the targets of overall permanent residents in Canada outside Quebec will be 8.5% in 2025, 9.5% in 2026, and 10% in 2027. These targets display our commitment to support the growth of Francophone communities outside Quebec and reflect our Francophone immigration policy.
From St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, this NDP Liberal government isn't worth the cost or the corruption. Under this government, GC Strategies, a two-person firm working out of their basement, received a sole source contract for a Arrive scam. They did no work, the app didn't work, and they ran off with 20 million taxpayer dollars, a total scam. So, in the face of that, what specific steps is this government taking to get taxpayers their money back?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I have said time and time again, that we expect our procurement process to be followed with the rules and the regulations that are put in place. CBSA has already initiated a number of measures to build a more robust system. But I'd like to ask the member opposite, how far back would he like to go in terms of these contracts? Because just in 5 years under the Conservative government, those two principled employees that he speaks of had at least 13 contracts. Wow. So would he like that money back as well?
Wow. The Honourable Member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, it is clear that this government has taken no concrete measures to make taxpayers whole. The RCMP have opened an investigation into GC Strategies, and this week the Auditor General announced that she is investigating the $100 million in contracts awarded to GC Strategies by these Liberals. If the Liberals won't even try to get taxpayers their money back, then will they get out of the way and call an election so that Canadians can elect a common-sense Conservative government that will?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, once again, we see the Conservatives completely misleading Canadians. It was actually under the Conservative government that these contracts first began with these principled employees. So they talk about getting out of the way. They were the ones that oversaw a procurement process that had these same individuals receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars in contracts. We have actually put in place through the CBSA a number of measures to ensure that our procurement process is robust, and we will continue to work to make sure that there's transparency in our system, something they failed to do.
The Honourable Member from Brandon Souris.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Mr. Speaker, you've ruled that the Liberals violated a House order to turn over evidence for a criminal investigation into their latest $400 million scandal. When Canadians can't afford to eat, heat, or house themselves, Parliament should not have to focus on ending a Liberal scandal. Will the NDP Liberals end this cover-up and give proof to the police so that we can get accountability for corruption and Parliament can get working again?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I think what we need is accountability to Canadians and why it is that the Conservative Party continues to filibuster the business of the House of Commons. And nothing has really changed because, do you know, when it comes to the business of the House of the Commons, one Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, is the only Prime Minister to ever be held in contempt of Parliament. Who was his Parliamentary Secretary at the time? Today's Leader of the Conservative Party. Mr. Speaker, today's Leader of the Conservative Party still refuses to get the security clearance that's necessary so he can become informed about foreign interference. The question I have for the Leader of the Conservative Party, what is he hiding? What isn't he telling Canadians, Mr. Speaker?
L'honorable député d'Alfred Pellan.
Mr. Speaker, in the last year we have learned that many countries, including India, Iran, Russia, and China, are involved in foreign interference in Canada. In fact, last week we learned that agents of the Indian government are involved in serious criminal activity in Canada, including the murder of Canadian citizens. It's time for all parties to put politics aside and show Canadians that we stand together against the foreign interference. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice tell this House why it's important for all party leaders to obtain their security clearance and protect Canadians?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague from Alfred Pellan for the question. Look, yesterday we learned the leader of the Bloc Québécois received his security clearance. The only leader in this House who has refused and continues to put his head in the sand to get the security clearance is the leader of the official opposition, the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. So I repeat, in terms that he can understand, get the clearance, take the briefing, and please help us defend this country.
The honourable member from Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, this government continues to ignore the people of Windsor, Essex by allowing hazardous material to cross the Ambassador Bridge in a shady deal. We know the border officers won't even get the proper training they need to deal with the eventual disasters that will occur. Instead of detailed in-person courses to go over what to do in the case of disasters, they are learning from 2 slides in an online slideshow. The Liberals continue to cave to the Ambassador Bridge lobbyists to get to be able to board up homes, get special plaza privileges, and now hazmat money to line their pockets. Are the Liberals going to choose safety of our environment and economy or the lobby interests of a U.S. billionaire and his empire?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do want to thank the member for that question. As the member knows, because we've been discussing this issue for the past few months, Transport Canada is in discussions currently, not only with the member, but also with the province and the city, and it's an issue that we are taking seriously and we will resolve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question to the government is this. A recent article and detailed study in the National Observer pointed out that the Pest Management Regulatory Agency worked hand in glove with the pesticide manufacturer Bayer to stop the impending ban of dangerous neonicotinoid insecticides posing threats to human health and the environment. My question is simple. Will the government ban these insecticides and do an investigation to stop having our Pest Management Regulatory Agency defend manufacturers and start defending Canadians?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for the question. Speaker, we are committed to ensuring that pesticides used in Canada are safe for human health and the environment. All pesticides undergo a rigorous scientific review process prior to being approved for sale in Canada, and they are regularly reviewed to ensure they continue to meet health and safety standards. We take the concerns raised in the research by Dr. Christy Morrissey seriously, and the PMRA is examining the concerns raised. Thank you.